here, which is our two keynote speakers who you're going to hear from. So, what is reverse pitch? The reverse pitch competition, from just a very basic level, it is a social innovation program that the City of Austin puts on with a variety of community partners as well as multiple departments within the City of Austin. And our goal is to help turn valuable raw materials that are currently leaving local businesses as waste into the foundation of new social business ventures. And we do this through a competition format that really opens us up to the community to say to local businesses, what are your waste challenges that you're unable to solve? And then also once we hear that, turning to the entrepreneur community and saying, what can you do with this material, and bringing their creativity and their business savvy to apply to this problem of waste leaving businesses. So it's a 4-step process, the competition. At the first step, local businesses, institutions, and nonprofits that have some kind of material that has unrealized value pitch those materials to entrepreneurs. That's in an opening pitch event that will happen in this early 2018. After that, entrepreneurs will be matched with mentors and work with advisors to create and refine business ideas that repurpose one or more of the materials that are pitched at that opening event. Then finalists are going to be selected from those entrepreneurs to pitch their repurposing ideas to a panel of judges. So we'll reconvene again about 7 weeks later, and the best ideas will receive innovation prizes to kickstart their new venture. So like I said, there's lots of different ways to get involved, so I'm going to go through the different roles that you can play in reverse pitch. So it starts with material suppliers. So we need businesses that have materials that they realize could do more that is currently happening with them. So if your business has an ongoing byproduct, surplus, or scrap product that has unrealized value, like maybe just every week you look in the dumpster and you're like, oh man, that really could do something else rather than just going to the waste, but I don't know who could possibly make use of this material. You are a great fit for reverse pitch. So you're someone who's interested in finding a solution and willing to work with entrepreneurs who are in the competition to answer their questions about, what material do you have, what is the consistency of it, let me try out a sample, and helping them as they develop their ideas and then after the competition. And this is the first step of our competition, is getting these material suppliers. So if that sounds like you, we have an online application that's due December 1st. We also, before I go on to our next role, I forgot we had this slide about past material suppliers. So to give you a sense of the types of materials we've had in the competition, we've run this competition for 2 years, and these are the material suppliers that we've had in the past. Livestrong pitched an outdated version of their yellow silicone wristbands. We had Goodwill Industries pitch their container glass that's unsold from Goodwill's, as well as wicker baskets that don't get sold. Apparently a lot of people donate wicker baskets to Goodwill, and not enough people go to Goodwill to buy them. We have Build-A-Sign that pitched in the past vinyl banners from their sign manufacturing business. Central Texas Food Bank, who's here tonight, I know, is pitched their unwanted canned goods. We had In-N-Out Burger, also joining us again tonight, that pitched mesh plastic bags that their produce arrives in. Hops and Grain, which is a local brewery, pitched spent grain from their brewing process. Austin Creative Reuse pitched fabric samples. Half Price Book pitched vinyl records and used books. And then Travis County pitched waterproof clogs, which are part of their correctional facility. Their inmates wore through them, and they didn't have a recycling option for them. Recycled Reads, again, pitched VHS tapes and other used media, books and CDs. And then the City of Austin's Transportation Department pitched vinyl banners from their street banner program. So that gives you a sense of the types of materials that are in reverse pitch. But I don't want this to constrain you. Like if you're a business that's just got any material in mind based on how I described it, I hope you get in touch with us and see if it's a good fit for reverse pitch. We also look for mentors from the community. So if you are a seasoned business professional, if you've mentored startups before, if you are a successful entrepreneur yourself, and you want to help support other social enterprises in Austin, we want to hear from you. We look for individuals that can volunteer between 5 and 7 hours of their time over about 6 weeks during the competition. So if that sounds like you, please get in touch. We also have an advisor role. Rather than being matched one-on-one with our entrepreneurs like our mentors are, our advisors have some kind of deep subject matter expertise that's relevant to reverse pitch competitors. So that could be like logistics expertise, or maybe they're an expert in recycling specifically, and they make themselves available for questions from competitors to just answer on an as-needed basis. Whereas our mentors are really focused on refining the business idea and work one-on-one with competitors throughout the competition. We're also looking for sponsors. So if you are a service provider that works with startups or small businesses, we have a cash prize that's part of the reverse pitch competition, but we also want to add in-kind prizes to that so that our entrepreneurs not only have funding to get their idea off the ground, but they have wraparound services like maybe co-working space, consulting, legal services, storage space, anything like that. If that's something you're interested in providing, let us know. We do have a conflict of interest policy, which I can tell you more about one-on-one. We have to have no conflicts of interest with the City of Austin to be a sponsor. And then lastly, competitors, which are really the linchpin of this competition, of course. So if you're an aspiring social entrepreneur, we definitely want to hear from you. This is a great way to get your foot in the door of a competition event and learn about a problem in our community and see if you can solve it. But also we're interested in hearing from and having compete businesses or nonprofits that are already in existence but think that they might be able to use one of the reverse pitch materials as an input in their business. So maybe they can substitute something that's pitched in reverse pitch for something that's already an input. Or it could be a nonprofit that is looking for a new earned revenue stream to fund their mission and could start a social enterprise. So even if you're already in existence, doesn't mean you can't participate in reverse pitch as a competitor. And we're going to hear in a little bit from one of our competitors from last year. Our winning team was Grub, and they're going to tell you about where they've gone from the competition last year up to today and all the success that we've been so proud to see them have. So I know some of you have participated in reverse pitch before, so I wanted to give a summary of what's going to be new in 2018. So the first thing, of course, is our timing has changed. So we added this kickoff event to get you all excited about the idea of circular economy and hopefully bring some new voices into the reverse pitch competition. So normally in the fall we would have our opening pitch, but we've moved that to January, so that's going to happen January 17th. And then we will close the competition on March 7th with our final pitch event. We're also very excited this year to be increasing our prize pool from $10,000 to $20,000. So we're really excited about that, and we're able to do that through the support of various city departments that are contributing to this prize. And we are also adding another award category. So as I mentioned, you can be both a brand new business or just a person with an idea who wants to start something. And we will have a seed stage category for you. You can also be an existing business that wants to adjust your business model around these materials. And so we also have a growth stage category. So we'll have 2 different winners this year, which we're excited about. And then we also have added to the schedule more training and feedback opportunities. So we will have some classes and workshops facilitated by our small business program during the course of between when the opening pitch event happens and you have to submit your finalist application. You'll have a chance to get some training on how to quickly take an idea to a revenue generating business model. And we'll also have a feedback session with a group of our mentors before you have to submit your finalist application, practicing your pitch and getting confident in the value proposition that you offer. So this is going to be the schedule of events. Of course, we're at the kickoff now. The first big milestone is December 1st, where we'll have the material supplier applications due. And then in mid-December, we'll be able to announce what material suppliers are in the competition, and that's when you'll get to look at our website and see a little bit about those materials and start generating those ideas for what you want to pitch come March. The opening pitch event will be the formal opening of the competition, and then we'll have that ideation workshop and several kind of steps along the way to get us to the final pitch in March. And all of our public events will be back here at the Atlassian, and you can register for those at that URL, reversepitch.org/events. This schedule of events is also on our website, so you can check it out there and save the dates. So that's all I have to give you the overview quickly. I know I rushed through that of the reverse pitch competition. But I'm sure you have questions, or if you do, we have a Q&A table over here with these lovely people in the green shirts. They can answer any question that you have about reverse pitch. You can also visit our website or contact me by email to either tell me you want to participate in one of these ways or just ask questions about the right fit for you or just in general about the competition. So we hope to hear from you. And now we're going to move into, like I said, the meat of our event and hear from two really amazing speakers that we've brought here for you who are experts in the circular economy and who provide two really different perspectives on what the circular economy means. And first up, we have Dan Phillips. Dan is a designer and a builder working in Huntsville, Texas. Dan and his wife, Marcia, who is also here, work with unskilled workers to build recycled housing from free, salvaged, and recycled materials. Their company is currently moving toward a commercial market for clients who have a taste for recycling and social entrepreneurship. They've been associated with the construction industry for over 20 years, and Dan is now concentrating on using one social problem to solve another through their low-income housing initiative, the Phoenix Commotion. In the spring of 2012, Dan lectured at the 9th International Convention on Architecture in Budapest. He's been the keynote speaker of the Zero Waste International Association Conference, hosted by Zero Waste Canada, and in 2015 he spoke at the 14th International Architect Encounter in Italy. So he's been all over the world, and we are lucky to have him here. So now I'm going to turn it over to Dan and pull up his presentation.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Steve. 1, 2, 3. Can everyone hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. I've been at building recycled houses for 20 years, my wife and I have. And in order to understand, I'll have some pictures of some of my projects up here. And the conspicuous thing about these are that most of them contain some sort of repurposed material. But I'm not going to speak specifically about those. I want to talk about some of the concepts that drive what I do. And the first is that we have lost track of who we are as a species. I want to talk to you a little bit about phenomenology, which is a branch of philosophy that studies who we really are in a world that really is completely sanitized of cultural overlay and personal bias. And probably the easiest way to understand that is to close your eyes and touch your nose. In fact, close your eyes and touch your nose. Did anybody miss? No, you got it. You trusted those deeper instincts and sensibilities, and they're the same instincts and sensibilities that our savage ancestors had tens of thousands of years ago. They're still there. All we have to do is access them. Now, human beings, David Abram, who wrote a book titled Dispel the Sensuous, who is a phenomenologist, said that our environmental problems began tens of thousands of years ago when we made the jump to literate culture. Before then, if I wanted to refer to the color red, I'd hold up a Bing cherry or a rose or prick my finger. In a literate culture, I have the word red, which abstracts that quality common to all three, but not specific to any one. So we've abstracted ourselves this much from the natural world, this much from that natural system of checks and balances that the natural world provides. There isn't such a thing as 9:42 a.m. or 45 cents in the natural world. But fast forward 5,000, 10,000, 30,000 years, excuse me, to today, we love language. We love our symbol systems, and we're good at it. Language and our symbol systems abstracts the natural world so we can study it, control it, exploit it. But in turn, those abstractions dictate what the built environment should be like. And so, buried in our DNA, well, we need the utility of language. If I want to communicate, I'm going down to the corner store to get a loaf of bread and a pound of butter, I'll be back in 10 minutes so I can get my truck started. I need the utility of language then. But language will never be able to say this. Ever. not in a million years. Language will never be able to say what Pachelbel's canon in D major delivers, or Michelangelo's pietà. Ever. Those are things that emanate from the natural world, from the real world around us, completely apart from our symbol systems and language. Now, our DNA has an algorithm that requires us to maintain consistency of the apperceptive mass, that is our data banks. That is, every perception we have needs to tally with the one like it before, or we become disoriented and demented and disorganized. And so, see how I'm tasking. And so, I can show you an object you've never seen before. You go, oh yeah, I know what that is. That's his cell phone. Yeah. You're sizing up the structural features, going through your data banks and going, ha, cell phone. But if I took a bite out of it, you go, wait a second. That's not a real cell phone. That's one of those new edible cell phones. And you'd have to start a new category right between edible and cell phone. That's how we learn, through repetition. So if I translate that to the building industry, and we have a wall of window panes and one is cracked, we go, oh dear, that's cracked. Let's take that out, throw it away so nobody can use it, because after all, that's what you do with a cracked window. Never mind that it doesn't affect our lives at all, not in the slightest. It only rattles that expected unity of structural features. However, if I took a small hammer and I added cracks to all the other window panes in that panel, then I have a pattern. And Gestalt psychology emphasizes recognition of pattern over parts that comprise a pattern. It's nice, there's a pattern there. So if I have 100 of these and 100 of those, I have the possibility of a pattern. It doesn't make any difference what these and those are. Wine corks, bottle caps, broken tile, mirror bones, it doesn't make any difference. And that widens the field of free material a lot. Then, repetition is one of those principles of art and design that you've heard of. Balance, scale, rhythm, texture, color, symmetry. You know what those, you've heard those before. That's not just a recipe some guy cooked up. Those are basic human cravings buried in all of us. When you're first learning how to walk, put yourself up on the coffee table, take your first step, splat, tears. Okay, try it again. This time, 2 steps, tears. Eventually you got it. But in the meantime, you learned about gravity. Up is hard and takes time. Down is easy and dangerous. A lot of up or a lot of down is dramatic. If I asked you, which is heavier, ding or dong, dark brown or powder blue, the space in the cellar or the space in the attic? Since none of those things have any mass, how is it that you answer dark brown, dong, and cellar? It's our sense of gravity that informs lots of things. Our sense of color, scale, tone, bum, 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 is a function of gravity. We can access that sensibility anytime we want in terms of scale and so forth and so on. Then every event in the world, every visual event or kinetic event has a signature rhythm. So, you recognize that. Now I'm going to give you the same information without the rhythm. Flattens that out. Every teacher recognizes the rhythm and dynamic of a shouting match that's going to lead to a fist fight, even though it's around the corner in the hallway. Oh, gotta go, something's going on around. Look, is that rain? Oh, sounds like somebody got T-boned. We feel those rhythms directly. And they don't come to us in tidy 2, 4, 3, 4, and 4, 4 meter. They're wild constellations of mixed meter and cadenzas and syncopations thrown in. They're extremely organic, and we feel those things directly. If I asked you, would you rather scrape your knee on a satin sheet or asphalt? You don't have to get out the manual on knee scraping. Satin sheet. Whoa, asphalt, huh? We feel that instantly. That informs our sense of texture. All these sensibilities are buried in all of us. We all can do this. All we have to do is go, I think I'm going to try this. Now, Friedrich Nietzsche, along about 1885, wrote a book titled The Birth of Tragedy. And in there, he talked about cultures as swinging between one of two perspectives. On the one hand, we have an Apollonian perspective, which is pre-calculated, intellectualized, and perfect. On the other end of the spectrum, we have a Dionysian perspective, which is more given to the passions and intuition, and tolerant of organic texture and human gesture. So the way the Apollonian personality hangs a picture, so you get out a transit and a laser level and a micrometer. Okay, honey, 1,000th of an inch to the left. That's where you want the picture, right there. Predicated on plumb level, score centered, and symmetrical. The Dionysian personality takes the picture and goes, that's the difference. We're accessing two different substrates for judgment. One is a predetermined model, plumb level, score centered, and symmetrical. The other, we're accessing deeper sensibilities buried in every one of us. We have to make an adjustment between our ears in order to do that. Then, arguably, the Industrial Revolution had its roots in the Renaissance, with the advent of humanism, as we know it. Then here came the French Revolution. By the middle of the 19th century, it is in full flower, and we're making doomaflogies and gizmos and contraptions that will do anything that up to that point had to be done by hand. Wow. How'd you get 20 of these in the time I can only do? Oh, you've got a machine. Here came standardized materials. With standardized materials came standardized design strategies. And then the whole notion that whatever problem we could possibly have, there's a recipe or a formula for its solution. That grows out of language, which carries along with it cultural baggage. And that cultural baggage manifests itself in cultural mindsets, which then turn themselves into cultural expectations. That's why all of our houses look the same. They're all geometrical. They look all pretty much the same, because they're all built out of machines that spit these materials out, and the designers are predicating those designs on those materials. You never get to access your deeper sensibilities and make your own design decisions. We're being pushed around by the marketplace. Then, a man named Richard Lang, on the heels and shoulders of many, many philosophers and writers, developed the concept of the divided self. And he said that people act differently when they know they're alone than when somebody else is around. And so, if I'm eating spaghetti and I know I'm alone, I can eat like a backhoe. I can wet my mouth with my sleeve, chew with my mouth open, napkin on the table, make little noises, scratch wherever I want. But as soon as you walk in, I go, spaghetti sauce there, napkin in my lap, mouth closed, no noises, no scratching. And what I'm doing is fulfilling your expectation for how I should behave. I'm fulfilling your expectation for how I should lead my life. I was leading my life the way I wanted to before you barged in. But as soon as you come in, I make that adjustment. And those cultural pressures, those expectations are everywhere. I'll bet all your shoes match. You're all sitting one person to a chair. You could have said, your lap looks a little bit more comfortable. Why did I sit in your lap? Nobody did that. We feel those cultural expectations. They are everywhere. And those mindsets are everywhere. When Christians are good guys, Muslims are bad guys, or vice versa. Republicans have silver bullets, Democrats just have bows and arrows, or vice versa. The simple truth is the planet doesn't care what our issues are. A hurricane will annihilate Christians and Muslims, Democrats and Republicans with equal dispatch. So it devolves upon us to discover and find out and cling to whoever we are and who we really are, and not let the marketplace or our symbol systems dictate who we are. And the great irony is all of our belief systems are couched in language in our symbol systems. But we can say, no, I'll check with deeper sensibilities and make my own decisions, not let the marketplace dictate what I'm going to wear, what I'm going to eat, what I'm going to drive, and the houses we build. All these concepts drive what I do. Now, later on tonight, what you might want to do is go out by yourself, close your eyes, touch your nose, and revel in your humanity. It might be a good time to start an inner movie about how you personally saved the world because you alone had the nerve and the courage to access those deeper sensibilities and make your own decisions quite apart from cultural expectations or the marketplace and all those cultural pressures. And at the end of the movie, think about it. After all, you just saved the world. And of course, there will be insane applause. And while you're watching a movie about yourself, you might even want to get some popcorn.
Really had his 15 minutes down to a science. Thank you so much, Dan. It's really awesome to see all of your work scrolling behind you and getting us to think about bigger concepts. Next up we have Stephen Roberts from Dell. He's the Global Sustainability Marketing Manager there, where he drives the promotion of all things green and good, and his focus is on the intersection of sustainability and technology with a special emphasis on circular economy and net positive efforts. Before he joined Dell in 2011, he spent 13 years in the advertising and public relations field as a part of Enviromedia here in Austin, Texas. He's managed part of the Don't Mess with Texas campaign and helped start America's Recycles Day, so has great recycling bona fides as well. He also holds a master's degree in Latin American history, which is very useful during trivia games. So next up is Stephen Roberts. Come on up.
Thank you. Gotta love when you can hear about semiotics, gravity, and Nietzsche, and realize that you're actually talking about the circular economy. I think it's fantastic the way that Dan put all that together. So thank you guys for having me. There are a lot of people that are talking about, a lot of companies that are talking about what they're doing in the circular economy right now, but there aren't a lot of them that are actually showing the world what they're doing. And that's one of the things that really gets me excited about where Dell is today in relationship to the circular economy, because it's something that we're trying very hard to internalize and turn into business as usual. But before I dive into how we're doing that and even why we're doing that, I want to go through some of the reasons that underlie why all of us really need to be looking at the circular economy. And the first of those are the demographic changes that are coming. We are on the cusp of massive demographic change like the world has never seen before. In the next 15 years, we're going to add another billion people to the planet. 15 years after that, it'll be another billion people, and we'll be up to almost 10 billion people on this planet. Meanwhile, we're going to have 3 billion people move into what is the middle class and adopting new consumption habits, new ways of acting, new ways of using resources, new ways of behaving. And that is a massive strain on what our planet can actually endure. Right now, today, according to the Global Footprint Network, we are using 1.6 Earth's worth of resources per year. By the middle of August, we used up everything that could be regenerated, And right now, if you think about it kind of like a savings account, right? We should be living off of the interest. Instead, we are dipping into our capital. And if you've never had to do that with your own bank account, you know how unsustainable that really is. If we continue at the pace that we're going on, by the year 2030, we're going to need 2 Earths just to fulfill our needs. By the year 2050, that could be 5. And if you haven't checked lately, you only have 1. You're not in a position to just create another Earth. So the problem, though, in some respects, isn't just in the resources that are there. It's in how we're using them. And I like to define the circular economy more by its opposite, which is the linear economy. And that's the way that the economy is set up today. It's this idea that you take resources, you dig them up, you chop them down, you pull them out, you turn them into something, and then when you're done with them, you throw them away. And it's this one-way conveyor belt that either takes these resources into landfills, out into the environment, where they become litter, they're getting used up. The problem with that, as a design, as a system, is that those resources just get lost, and then they become useless. They're no longer resources when they get thrown away. The circular economy says, okay, forget that. How do we instead turn those resources that are in the economy into things that stay in the economy? How do we make sure that what gets used continues to be useful? And if it's fallen out of the economy, how do we pull it back in? So our friends at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation like to use what they call the butterfly diagram. I prefer my nice little circle. It's a little easier to understand. But they try to make an explanation of all the different ways that we keep resources circulating within the economy. And I like really how they break it down into 3 principles, where the first one of those is this idea of preserving or regenerating natural capital. How do you, back to that idea of the Earths that we're using up, how do you keep those resources either recirculating or actually regenerate them because they're getting used so much? The other principle is how do you increase the yield of whatever it is you're doing without having to actually use more stuff? And I think that's a very important and valuable concept in the circular economy. You don't have to use stuff to create value within the economy. And then the third principle within that is this idea of what I call hacking the process, right? How can you look at the system? How can you look at the way things are designed and find the inefficiencies and design them out of that whole process? It's this whole idea of systems thinking, of looking not just at the one thing you're doing, but where it fits in the bigger picture, and using that to get you to this circular approach. So, what is it that Dell is doing? Well, the first thing I want to talk about is this idea of how we make products. And we always start with this idea of a life cycle approach. This might be familiar to some of you, but it's the idea that whatever the product is that we're making, it should be designed with this idea that those materials are going to keep going around and around. So we really do start, we've many times sent our designers to go work with recyclers and tear apart a computer themselves so that they understand all the mistakes that they made and how hard it can be. And amazingly, the next time they design the computer, it shows up with easy to pull apart snaps and fewer glues. But in reality, we don't always start with this recycling in mind piece. We actually start with this idea that no matter what, the computer really shouldn't go to waste, right? We never want to see a computer going to waste. And the idea behind that is start with the idea that a computer shouldn't be a one-time use thing, right? We see it all the time. As a matter of fact, we get about 1 million computers that come through our global Dell outlet that get resold as refurbished computers. We have way more than that go through programs like Goodwill. We want to see those computers continue to get a second life or a third life. And if they're no longer usable, if they're too inefficient, because sometimes that's the issue too, they're not able to do what they need to do, there's still parts that are useful. So this idea of modularity, of having parts that can be interchangeable, of things that can be reusable, of making sure that when you design something, you don't need special tools. You can use a regular Phillips screwdriver to take it apart. That you haven't glued something in there like a battery that you can't take out and replace when the battery goes bad, because then you'd have to throw the whole thing away. Well, that's just doesn't make sense. The other thing is really when you're thinking about these sorts of designs, labeling stuff. Just making sure that when somebody goes to try and take it apart, they know what materials they're using. And more than just necessarily, hey, it's number 2 plastic. The other thing is also how do you look at it from the standpoint of making sure that those materials are materials that could be reused. And so we do try as best as possible to use, first of all, to use recyclable materials. About 90% of a computer is recyclable. But then also, when you turn around and design it, how do you reuse materials? And one of the projects that we've been working on is this idea of a closed loop recycling with our plastics within our system. So we've had a technology take-back program for a very long time. We've worked with Goodwill. You can recycle computers, any brand, whether it's working or not, you can recycle it for free, right? Great. We've been doing that. They've been turning around, selling the materials out onto the market after they've picked out whatever can be reused. Meanwhile, we've been out there buying recycled plastic. And long about 2012, 2013, we finally said, wait a minute. So we're helping them create recycled plastic, and we're buying recycled plastic. Why don't we buy our own recycled plastic? So we're not always all that bright. We finally figured that out. And since 2014, we've actually managed to recycle about 11 million pounds worth of plastic back into new parts. That's almost hundreds of thousands of units at this point that have recycled content that used to be an old computer. I always like to think that it used to be an old HP, and now it's a Dell. But the other thing that's been so important about this project for us is that it started off as a pilot project. We tested it to see if it would work, but we've really tried to scale it and expand it. And I think that's one of the most important things about the circular economy is this idea that you need to find out if it works, but once you do, how do you make it part of business as usual? I mean, at this point, we have 91 products that are using these closed loop parts. We're about to start talking about closed loop gold, where the gold that we recycle gets put back into a computer. And more importantly for the business, because believe me, Dell likes to save their money, this program is saving us money over our traditional way of doing things. Right now, the only limiting factor for us is how much recycled content plastic we can get into the system. It's not only having that effect on our bottom line, but it is reducing the impact on the environment. We did a natural capital study that shows that it's reducing the amount of harm that is done. And maybe more importantly, there's this incredible potential that exists. Right now, about 35% of all the plastics we use at Dell across all our products is recycled content, which is good, but we can do a lot more. And we're trying to move toward that. But if you look at it, so our closed loop, small percentage. Total recycled content is about a third of what we use. If you looked at the rest of plastic, just in the PC industry, look at the amount of opportunity that is there. And it's that sort of thing that we all need to be capitalizing on. So the other thing that I want to hit on really quickly, and it may seem a little bit of a disconnect from Dell, but there's this problem of plastics that leak out of the economy. And one of the biggest sources of that right now is in our oceans, where there's 8 million tons of plastic entering the ocean every year. That is a wasted resource. That is stuff that has exited the economy. And what we are trying to do is actually turn that into a viable product for ourselves. To date, we've made about 8 tons worth of plastic packaging from recycled content from ocean plastics. We are looking to expand that to about 10 times that amount annually. And we're also working with a consortium of other large manufacturers. I'd name names, but we're going to announce that in like 2 weeks. But we're working with them to get them to do it too. We're actually studying where are the problems, where can we get the most ocean plastics to bring back into the economy so that it matters at scale for companies like us and other large manufacturers, because that's what we need. We don't need, unfortunately, a beach cleanup. We need tons and tons of the material at one time. So the last thing that I want to hit on is this idea that sort of goes beyond what I consider the backbone of the circular economy, that whole, the circular design, the recycled and by recycled piece of it. And that is, those ideas of how do you hack the system and how do you create greater yield from the materials that you use. And I'm going to use one example, and that's from a customer of ours called Aero Farms. And if you haven't heard of Aero Farms, they do vertical farming, and this is an image from one of their farms in New Jersey. What they do is very high tech. They are using technology to control everything about their environment. The amount of water that goes to the plants, the misting, when it happens, the wavelength of the lights, the temperature, whether or not there's air movement and when that happens, when to pick. They use sensors to figure out how nutrient dense the leaves are. They have this down to what feels like very much a science. All that technology helps them understand what to do in the minute, in the moment. Hey, this plant needs more water, or this plant needs more fertilizer. But all of that data, when you start to add it up, it tells you a story about the bigger system. And that's the thing that's been really neat about Aero Farms, is that they've been adding all this data together. And what they're finding is ways to do their whole process differently to get more out of what they're doing. Now, their system is already pretty intense to begin with. Their ability to maximize a yield with the added technology has gone off the charts. At this point, they're using 95% less water than a typical farm, and they produce 390 times more food per acre than a conventional farm. And it's those kind of yields, those kinds of ways of doing more with the same stuff, that is what the circular economy holds as a true promise when you start to look at all of those demographic and economic factors that we're facing in the next 10 to 15 years. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen. It's awesome that Dell is headquartered here in Central Texas and that this is the kind of work that you're doing. It really helps put Austin on the map for circular economy. So now what we're going to do is do a joint Q&A. So Dan, if you want to come back up. So if you have any questions for either of our speakers, now is the time. And we're going to pass a microphone around because we are filming this event, so we want to make sure to capture the audio of your question. But we wanted to have them answer this, do these joint Q&A together because they do represent two such different perspectives on the circular economy. So you feel free to ask a question to one or the other, but also to both of them, just about anything they talked about or about the general concept of circular economy if they didn't touch on it. So does anyone have a question? Yes.
I can talk really loud. Okay, so my question is for Stephen. Regarding your harvesting of plastic from the oceans, have you gone out with an ocean skimmer to look for these big floating islands of plastic trash?
Yeah, looking for them isn't the problem. Unfortunately, they're huge. We are actually, at this point, I like to use the analogy of a bathtub, right? If you've got water pouring into a bathtub and it's overflowing, what's the first thing that you do? Turn the water off. The cleanest plastic that we can get, the most concentrated supply that we can get, is actually right on shore in those coastal areas, the beaches, the waterways, near shore. That's where we're concentrating our efforts. There are other folks that are working on trying to figure out how to skim it. But one of the first things that we learned, as I mentioned, we try to do pilot projects, right? I would call our current program in sort of the walk phase. If you think of like crawling being like truly tested out, feasibility, piloted as a walk, and then run, scale it as big as you can. We're walking right now. When we were crawling, we looked into using those materials that are out there in the garbage gyres. And the reality is, it is so contaminated that the plastics are all mixed up. The reality is, it's not, the amount of energy that you would have to put in to get something usable for the purposes of a computer just couldn't be justified. But that said, I know there are people working on it, and there are other uses where that mixed plastic has a use. For us, you don't want your computer to melt. It's kind of a bad thing. And the other part of it too is just the energy that goes into the collection. For us, when we live on somewhat tight margins, it's hard to pay that much extra for that plastic.
You mentioned the customers reusing computer parts. How do you deal with collection with consumers once they're done with, for example, a Dell computer? I just know that I've worked with the average consumer doesn't really look to return it to Dell for that purpose. How do you deal with collection basically on a mass scale?
So we actually have a partnership with Goodwill that's been fantastic for us. There are 2,000 Goodwills around the country that participate that you can bring in. It doesn't have to be a Dell. You can bring in anything. And it helps put people back to work while at the same time bringing those resources in. We have our own take-back programs. We have those operating in 83 countries and territories around the world. For consumers, we make it free. We try as best as we can to make it easy and simple. You can literally print out a waybill and ship it off to us. But the reality, and it's kind of what you touched on, is that awareness. And that's something, we work with other recycling groups to help try and change that. But it's truly, it's a mindset that we have to all of us have to be changing about not just computers, but frankly, a lot of things.
Thank you. So I've heard that there's a lot of definitions on circular economy, and Steve just gave us one. But how can we reconcile all the different definitions into making something that everybody understands? I think there's about more than 200 definitions for circular economy.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I like to say it's easiest to define it in terms of what it's not, and that is a linear economy. There are a lot of models out there, and I struggle with that every day because part of my job is to help explain what is the circular economy and explain it to our customers why they should care that we're doing this. Because let's face it, a recycled plastic part in a computer doesn't make the computer run faster, doesn't make it look better, it doesn't change the function at all. So when it comes to defining the circular economy, I think it's really a matter of centering on those sort of key ideas. I flirt with using Ellen MacArthur Foundation's definitions and try and come up with my own, and I go back and forth all the time. But for me, it always comes back to this idea of, look, right now we have a linear economy, and that's the problem. Yeah.
Do you have an answer?
I'm sorry.
Do you have a definition?
Yeah, how do you reconcile all these different ways that
Well,
we
you
can talk
nailed
about
it right on the head. We have a linear economy right now, and I try to find intersecting characteristics of materials that have congruent characteristics of something I use. So if I want it round, I could get a doorknob or a baseball. Unlikely we'll use a doorknob for a baseball, but how much fun it would be to have a baseball as a doorknob. And so that's part of the mix in there, and so it gets real complicated real fast. And we have a craving for convenience and quick and easy and fast and cheap, and we want it to perform. Well, that gets in the way sometimes, and so it gets to be real messy, and I wish I had an answer.
Thank you for the comments, and especially Dan for your insights about language and our struggles to find words that help us to deal with the problem we're up against. You positioned this perfectly in that it's linear versus circular. I recently came across the comments that it's Newtonian thinking versus quantum thinking. Is that the type of answers that you guys start seeing coming up and popping up and where we have to head? Because just the term quantum thinking, quantum physics, really starts to turn me off. But it seems that this explains so much of the challenges that we're up against and what we have to, how we have to change. Do you guys see that same also?
You know, I'll laugh about that because I actually used the example of Schrödinger's cat the other day. But I do try very hard to avoid the idea of talking about quantum physics when I'm dealing with the circular economy, because it's complicated enough without that. If you're familiar with some of the concepts, or even with the thought experiment, there's a lot that they share in common. And it's interesting that you bring that up. But I think one of the biggest challenges that we have, and this gets back to the many definitions, is that when it comes right down to it, we have trouble finding even the language to talk about something that I think everyone in this room probably intuitively understands, but I can guarantee if you got up here with this microphone, you're gonna say it differently than I did, differently than Dan did. We're all gonna have a different way of explaining it. And that's not a bad thing if we're all envisioning the same thing, or if we're all finding different spins on it. But when people are not aware of it, when people have fundamental misunderstandings, that's where I think we run into the most trouble with growing this as a concept. And it's important to simplify it, not because it's hard for people to understand, but I think because it's difficult to stay on the same page with a concept like this, because there are so many ways to approach it.
Hello. I really appreciated both of your remarks and both of your talks. Dan, especially, I appreciated. I teach art history, so I appreciated the shout out to the elements and principles of art and design. Thank you. And to Michelangelo as well. My question is, and not to get off into another tangent, but what are your conceptions of how a cyclical economy as opposed to a linear economy could contribute to the problem of gentrification that we're facing in Austin as well? Does that fit in your conception of maybe creating more affordable housing for more residents of Austin and kind of combating that problem that we're facing so badly? Maybe you don't, but I was just curious.
I believe if we could change, make an attitude adjustment and a conceptual adjustment between our ears, then we could keep a whole lot of stuff from ever becoming part of the linear problem, that it goes back into affordable housing. The problem is that we all want brand new and squeaky clean, and recycle is somehow a little bit icky. But when you stay in a 5-star hotel, you don't sleep on new sheets. Well, we can launder building materials as well. And most of these buildings and houses that I've been building eventually get gentrified. That's not a bad thing, because that means people are buying into something that's just a little bit strange, a little bit whimsical, nevertheless very energy efficient but cheap, and extremely interesting, and they're code compliant. And so before long, we're going to get tired of marketed designs and demand something that has a little bit more pickle to it. A hamburger without pickle is a non-hamburger in my mind. And so houses are that way too. They all look pretty much the same. And if you go to third world countries, it's fun. They take whatever they have and use it and build their houses. Often enough they fall down. Okay. Our advantage is we have building codes. So this concept isn't going to be, I'm not going to be saving the world anytime soon. But one person can make an awful lot of noise in one lifetime. And one day that's going to catch on, and it's going to have to. I mean, it's going to have to. In 30 years, we're in trouble. we're really in trouble. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
I think the other thing, you know, they call it the circular economy as opposed to recycling 2.0. And the reason for that, and the thing that, you know, especially when we were first starting to look at how the things we were already doing fit into this concept, is we recognize that word economy. Ultimately, there's a lot of potential for making money. And that there are a lot of niches that can be filled. If all we cater to is a small segment that can afford this, it's going to fail. It absolutely has to take into account the full breadth of the economy for it to work.
Well, thank you both so much. And before we wrap up our formal program, we want to welcome up Robert Olivier, who was our winner of the reverse pitch competition last year, to tell us about his business Grub Tubs and how they've gone from reverse pitch win to where they are today. So come on up, Robert, and I'll plug.
How's everybody? Well, I didn't know I was going to be here last year, but definitely I wanted to thank everyone for speaking, and what you're seeing is there's definitely a top-down approach to everything that we're doing, so I'll start with a top-down approach as well. And it's with a very simple rule, is when you waste, you lose. It doesn't matter if we're losing resources in the United States or if we start outsourcing jobs to another country, but the moment you introduce waste into the economy, someone has to pick up the tab, and there is a loss. So, this is being Circular Economy Night. What is Grub Tubs? We are a circular economy service. We are collecting leftovers from restaurants and grocery stores. We pick them up. We add insects to these leftovers. These insects are nature's most powerful recycling organism you can imagine. And then what do we do with these insects? We feed them to chickens, so that farmers don't have to go to the feed store and buy feed. Instead, we're connecting our chefs, which are our restaurants, with our farmers, which are holding the chickens in that picture. And by using hundreds of millions of years of biology, we're actually bioconverting versus recycling. And then we realized that if we're going through all of this trouble of taking leftovers and bringing them to farms, our truck can also take food back from the farmers to the restaurants. And I got some restaurants really excited about that idea. But where it really comes down to is, in the beginning, and one of the reasons that we really loved this competition was that was the cornerstone to what we were doing from the get-go, is can we help out these farmers grow good food? And farm to table is great, but can we do something table to farm? In other words, can we reverse the losses? Because it's our farmers that are losing when we're throwing nutrients away. It's not just the fact that we don't want to buy ugly fruit, but it's also the fact that pigs are not eating these carrots and vegetables. So at Grub Tubs, in a nutshell, what has the competition done is, well, we got to say what we believe in, and we were pretty amazed, and we won the reverse competition last year. And so that was the beginning, and it got us our first farm. And then a few weeks later, we got into another accelerator here at Tarmac, and we got to meet a lot of people at 3M, and they taught me a lot. And then after that, Natalie basically emails me, says, hey, WeWork's got this competition, why don't you apply? And I applied for the $180,000 launch category, and I guess what we were doing was hitting the circular economy right in the heart. And so they bumped us up to the scale category while we were only prototyping with about 20 restaurants at the time. And we won the big prize here in Austin for $360,000. So what I'm, in a nutshell, putting together is, it comes with the vision first. Put the circular economy in the middle of your business plan. Think differently, be bold, and then things start happening. And that's what it did for us, and it's still happening. And to kind of bring a perspective is, the reason it's happening is because we put grub tubs last. We put the farmers first. You know, we think about what is it that we have to do to get them out of linear agriculture? Well, we got to let farmers make their own feed. Well, how can they make their own feed? Well, we provide them the biology. Okay, but then it really, when we started counting all these things back, all these losses because we waste, we started realizing net farm income is going up for these guys. And how can we expect our farmers to feed their animals if they can't even feed their families? So changing the paradigm, connecting our cities and our chefs with our farmers is what's been key to us. And this is why it's happening, is landfill's a negative cost. Compost has a little bit of value, but for every grub tub, we get about 5 cents a compost. Well, recycling it is great. That's a service that we can provide for restaurants, so that adds value to the local economy. But 70% of our food, when it's derived from animals, is feed. That's the cost. And so with grub tubs, we're halving that cost to the farmer in half. So the pink is what the grub tubs is making. The green is the savings to the farmer. That's his net farm income that's left at the end of the day. So when you see, you know, landfill, negative, compost, great. But when food becomes food again, that's the ultimate sign of value creation. And everyone, from the farmers to the chefs, the cities, you know, and the grub tubs, we all have a part to play in that. And to come back to the competition, obviously, if you weren't aware, we were working with Texas Central Food Bank, looking at their canned goods. But when we went and visited the facility, we saw that they had this massive storage space. So we're really excited to also work with them logistically to bring the food that we collect from our farmers as a food hub to the central bank, and then bring it to our restaurants so that they can order it for the next day. So everything that we have done is we've gone in and tried to rethink what the problem is. And so how do I start this? So quickly wanted to, where am I going here? Is it the video? So what we've done is our tubs are out of recycled plastic. They're reground materials, HDPE, and they conveniently stack right outside of the restaurant, which makes it really easy for the restaurant owners. Oh, we need an extra tub. But then this is what we used to have, these big 50-gallon recycling bins. And so we come in and we get rid of those. And we replace them with these grub tubs right there in the kitchen, right there. So they're at every station in the restaurant. And then once we're done, they come in on a pallet and we pick it up once they're full. So that's about a half a ton of food on one pallet just sitting there. Because we did it and thought differently, what's the most amazing thing is that not only are we we're getting twice as much food from every restaurant that we thought. And the reason that that's happening is because we're making it so easy for our customers. And so that's really, I would say, we never thought that we would solve the problem of food waste, but our customers are recovering their food by 90%, which is giving us twice as much work to do. But the trash can has gone from 55 gallons to 3 gallons. What goes in there is the sanitation gloves and the liners that they put every day inside the plastic trash cans, and then some shrink wrap. So the circular economy starts by solving a problem, and that's what your task is as contestants this year, is solve a problem and be bold. And you never know how many people are in this community are going to come up and support you. But for us, it started with the city and with the reverse pitch competition. Thank you.
I really couldn't have summed it up any better myself, so I won't try. And that concludes our program for this evening. I hope you stick around and enjoy some more of our zero waste themed snacks. And also come stop by and see us at our Q&A table to sign up to participate in this next year or to ask us questions. And thank you all so much for coming out and fighting traffic to be here tonight. Thanks.